Hello and welcome back to part 3 of this Cute Design Studio tutorial series. Last time we fixed our fonts and animated the first of our gauges. So let's carry on from where we left off and repeat the process with the next gauge. So let's choose the fuel gauge, and in parts of this video I'm going to speed up and we'll just recap the process. So let's go into the component. And we're going to do here what we did for the tachometer as well. So the first thing we want to do is fix the fonts. We'll just select them, change the names, change the weights, and position them where we want them. And go around and change all the fonts on the numbers as well. Next we want to animate the needle position. And we do this by dragging an item into our navigator from the library. We want to put that underneath our needle and make the needle a child of that item. Center it up and parent the needle to the item. Okay, we need to add a timeline for our animation. For this one we're going to use 1100 frames, and that's going to divide down into 100 milliliters per frame. So create animation, uncheck the running box because we want the default settings, and there we have our timeline. And like last time, we're just going to animate the rotation of the item for the beginning and the end. There we go. Now next we want to replace the arc with a arc studio component. So let's bring in the studio components by clicking on the flow tag. Drag an arc down into our navigator on top of the artwork that we're replacing. And we're going to line that up like we did the other one, just changing the width and height and position, the thickness of the line, and the beginning and end point of the arc. Once that's lined up, we can delete the original artwork. And animate the beginning and the end position of the arc. And fine-tune it by lining it up and making sure that the arc and the needle stay tight together all the way through the animation. And then we're just going to go back through and arrange it so our numbers and our indicator dots also match up to the position of the needle at these key values at every 100th value. And we're just lining everything up by eye until it looks right for us. Okay, great. So now you see it's tightly aligned and the dots and the numbers are in the right places as well. Okay, so next was the color animation for the arc. And once again, we're just going to bring up our colors, move along the timeline, inserting keyframes for the color changes until we have that. Then we're going to replace the ring with a pie. So we drag the pie into our navigator and line it up to replace our original artwork. Okay, then we can delete our original artwork and repeat the color animation for the pie. And again with the numbers, we're going to make the scaling and the color animation for each of the numbers. And we'll do this in exactly the same way as we did with the previous dial, creating an animation for the 0, so it's scaled up and colored at the beginning, creating an inverse of this animation at the end, and for each number in between create the animation where it scales up and down as it goes over the value as the needle passes over the number. So once we have our keyframes in place, we're just going to copy and paste all these keyframes all the way across all the numbers, remembering to change the colors where we need to. And we can just tweak the positions as we go. And there we go. So now we have the same animation as we made for our tachometer, now on our fuel dial. And there you see the needle and the arc move together, and as the needle passes the numbers, it triggers the animation. Okay, so what we want to do next is add an effect to this outside ring here. And what we want is for it to pulse with a glow while we're in the red range here. So when it goes underneath that 30, we want this outside ring to pulse as a warning indicator. And to do that, we're going to bring up the range that we're working with so we can have a look and see the frame range that we want to animate on our timeline. And then we're going to bring in an effect. So we're going to click on the Studio Effects flow tag. Now we have our effects here in the library. We're going to choose the glow effect. And we're going to drag it onto the form view. And then what we're going to do is just drag it out larger than the dial itself so that there is room for the effect to render over the edges of the current dial. Now we need to make the glow item the parent of the pie item, so we need to make the pie a child of the glow. So we do that by just dropping it on top. Now we have a glow item, and inside that we have the pie item. We can just reload it to take a look. And then we'll go into the text view so you can understand a little bit about why it is that way. And here we have this glow item at the top. And inside that we have the pie item. So that's the whole code block there for the glow effect. And because this is the way that the code model works, this is also the way it's modeled in your project navigator. Okay, so with the glow selected, what we can do is change the color of the glow. We'll just make it the same red as the dial. And zoom into our timeline so that we can animate. We want to change this spread and this radius. So let's just fiddle with it a little bit and have a look and find some settings that we like. That's a bit too much. Tweak it all back down again. We'll give it some more samples. So it's a nice high quality glow. Okay, so when we have the glow as we like it, we can turn on the record keyframe button. We're just going to insert keyframes for the radius and the spread. We can use these two to control the whole glow. And we want to drag out a few frames. And drop this radius down to 0 and add a keyframe. And we can do the same with the spread. Drop that back down to 0 as well. And then we're just going to select an Apple C to copy our original keyframes, and Apple V to paste them. So now we have a set of keyframes where the effect of the glow goes down to 0 and then comes back up again. So we're just going to copy the middle keyframes, the 0 keyframes again. Move along in our timeline and paste them. Then we can just copy both this set of keyframes. Paste those. And keep moving along the timeline, pasting our keyframes. Now we want to go all the way along to the 300 frame mark. And this is where our warning range ends and the color changes, so we'll have the glow effect finished there as well. So a few more keyframes, and there we are. So now when this gauge moves down underneath 30 frames, there'll be a glow effect that pulses on the pi item. Let's turn off the record button. And now we can see our glow effect as we scrub the playhead. And if we want to preview it, we can come back up to take a look at it from our main file. But actually, what we've forgotten to do is publish the frame number as an alias. So let's quickly just go back inside our dial. And select the timeline. You might need to check your filter. Then we can select this timeline and export the property as an alias for our current frame. We go into the root item and rename this property. Okay, so now we can go back up into our main file. And to preview the animation and to preview the effect, what we're going to do is create a timeline temporarily in this file, animate this frame value, then we can take a look at the animation, and then we can get rid of the timeline again. So add a timeline here. We'll just rename it for now, so we know when we're deleting it exactly which one it is. We're going to leave most of these settings default, but we're going to leave it running and we're going to make it continuous, and we're also going to set it to ping pong. And this is all with the default settings, so I'm expecting that this will be far too fast for the animation. Let's take a look with the live preview, and so you can see what I mean. So turn on the record button, set the first keyframe for 0, go all the way to the end, and set it to the last keyframe, so 1100. Turn off the record button. And we're going to use the live preview to have a look at this animation. Okay, there we see, but we see it's really, really too fast. Much faster than we anticipate it will be in the real UI. So what we can do, while we're just in the testing phase, is we can just come in and extend this duration. So we'll make this 10,000 instead of 1,000. Leave everything else the same. Save the project. Load the live preview. There we go. And now we see the animation is much slower. Now it's still a lot faster than it would probably be in the real UI, but it does give us an idea of our animation and it gives us an idea of our effects. So we can use this timeline to animate the UI manually to take a quick look at the effects as we're working on them. And there's our pulsing glow effect. Okay, but as we're going to do the mock data in the next video anyway, I'm just going to delete this timeline completely for now. So edit, delete timeline. And there we go. Now it's back to how it was and it's ready for the mock data in the next video. We'll just reset that to something. Right, so now we've done this for the fuel dial, we just have the speed dial to do. Now, we're going to go into the component. And we're going to repeat the process, and this time we'll try and go over it really fast. So fonts, numbers, and then we're going to add a timeline. And this one we are going to do a little bit differently. So we're going to make this a very small range timeline, only 200 frames, that matches up exactly with the kilometers per hour of our speedometer. Now normally this would be quite a short timeline, so if you were using purely integers, so a value per frame from the back end, the animation wouldn't look super smooth. And what we're going to do is we're going to use floating point numbers, so we're going to use real numbers when we do the back end to have a smooth animation that matches up exactly with what the real back end could be. So let's just create the animation, turn off the running, leave everything else default, and I'm going to explain this one in more detail when we look at the back end in the next video, but just to say that that's only 200 frames. Okay, so let's just quickly speed through the animation for this dial. We're going to skip the color animations this time, so it's going to be a bit faster. So we'll start again, like we did with the last ones, with animating the needle of our UI. So we're going to find the needle layer, which is here, drag an item in, center up the item, and then we're going to repeat the process of creating the beginning and end keyframes, replacing the arc, finding the beginning and end for the arc, deleting the artwork underneath, setting just a single color this time, animating the arc ranges, lining up the arc all the way along, positioning our indicator dots and numbers, and there we go, and just creating our number animations as well. And this time we're just going to use one color. And copy and paste them all across. And drag them all into position on the timeline. Okay, and there we go. Now we've finished this one. Let's go back up into our original artwork. There we go. And now we see all three of our dials are ready for the back end. So let's start work on the ISO panel. Let's go into this ISO component. And what we want to do here is drag in an ISO component from the Design Studio component library. So let's click on the flow tag, drag in the ISO item, and we can double click on the center of the item to bring up a library. So let's find a engine indicator. This one we're going to use with our tachometer, and select that. So we can rescale it and reposition it a bit. We can double click here to bring up a color picker. So we'll set the initial color, the off color for our icon. And we just fine tune the position and the size. So now what we want to do is turn this one icon into a component. We want to make sure it's not a child of anything first. We can go here, remove component into a separate file. We give the component a name and leave everything else default. Okay, so now we have a component from our first ISO icon. We can right click here, go inside the component. Now in this component, what we want is to create two different states for the ISO icon, an on and an off state. This is our off state. We'll add a new state by clicking here in the states panel, and we'll rename this one to active. And then we can bring up the color picker and set this icon to red in the active state. So now we have two states, on and off, and the color changes depending on the state of the icon. Now we're going to set this when condition, but first we need to create a property, we need to create a bool that we can evaluate to turn the icon on or off. So we're going to start by selecting the bool property type, and we're going to rename it, the property itself, to active. And we're going to set the when condition here, ISO icon, which is the item, dot active, and it should auto-complete. Now you see the indicator icon has changed, showing you that a when condition is in place. Let's save that and go back up to our ISO icon. We select it there. Just scroll across so we can find it, and we can see in the properties that now we have access to this bool that we can turn the icon on and off with. Let's export that property as an alias. Save the file and go back up to our main file. Now we see we have our icon, and if we select the component, here we have the exported property alias. Okay, so let's go back into this component. Select our icon and copy and paste enough of them to fill the whole bar width. So we just Apple C, Apple V, select them all, and then right click layout, layout in row layout. And we might need to just reload our scene. There we go. So now we can set the spacing for our row layout. And then just position it a little bit better. Okay. So now what we want to do is change these icons to their own one. So we can just double click inside the icon panel. We're going to look for some car icons here. Bring up the ISO icon browser. Search for the icon we're looking for. And then replace the copied icon with its own new icon. An air conditioning icon. And we'll look for something with a lock. Or the ABS will do. And the last one, we want to make a fuel icon, because we're going to use that with our fuel gauge. Okay, so now all of our ISO icons have their own icon. And we need to export all the properties as aliases. If we go to our main view now and select the ISO icon panel component, we can see we have the properties for all of our icons, and we can just toggle them on and off with the checkboxes here. Okay, so let's just quickly go back in there. We're going to make the background a little bit bigger so that it fits nicely around our icons. Just adjust the design a little bit. That's fine. Okay. So next time we're going to come back in and take a little look at how we can rename these properties and organize them a bit better. But for now, I think this video's gone on long enough, and I think this is a good place for us to stop. But we'll come back and have a look at these next time. And also we'll start bringing our mock data in to animate the rest of our UI. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.